training the areas. He's built the church in such a way that there's a great training system going on so that when God calls us to ministry, we know how to do what we're doing and just throw us to the line. I love serving here. But he's the best leader, supervisor, pastor I've ever had. That's our goal, guys. We've said that from the very beginning. Our goal is to make pastors heroes. And you're going to see that in that passage, the next passage that we talk about. So, he says here, that we'll all reach unity of faith and knowledge of the Son of God, become mature, attain to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we'll no longer be see, and I think this is what causes us to over-spiritualize this passage. Because just the nature of the way it sounds. Then we'll no longer be infants tossed back and forth. And we immediately apply this passage to what? Theology, right? So it's theology. It's all about theology. It's all that I've got to preach so that people aren't tossed around by all this. That is not what he's talking about. I know that's what we think it's talking about. It's not what he's talking about. Here's what he's saying. If you will equip and train, and that includes theology, that includes preaching, but then if you will train people to succeed at what God has gifted and called them to do, your people will not be distracted. They won't be looking for something else to do. They won't be going to another church down the road that's got some flash in the pan thing going on. You know why? Because they are so invested in what God's gifted and called them to do, because they've so been unleashed and empowered to do that in your church. They're so well trained. They're so encouraged. There's such an environment in your place that their whole life, all those needs are being met there. They have no need to be bounced around. They know it's nonsense when they hear nonsense. Right? Because they're experiencing the calling of God on their life. They're experiencing living it out, succeeding, excelling. I had a guy who has 2 PhDs in my church. The company asked him to go away to Austin for a year. He came. It was terrible. It was bad news for me. Love this guy. We were good friends. He said Russ company wants me to go away 2 years. I think it was 2 years. And he said, and they said if I'll go down to Austin for 2 years, basically he's a scientist, and work down there, that they will, if I can come back to Dallas, I can move back there and I can name my job. At TI, massive company in Texas. So I'm going, so bummer for me. So he goes, church was growing, early days of our church. 2 years goes by, church has been growing by the grace of God, some good things going on. I really locked on to started locking on to some of this empowering stuff, and, helping people understand what God's gifted and called them to do. It's about you, it's not about me. And so he came back. And I said, hey, listen, I said, before you get, he goes, wow, the church has grown. I mean, things like doubled since we were gone. This is cool. I said, listen, okay, before you get engaged here and start serving, I know what you're going to do, and get kind of drink the Kool-Aid here again. I want you, you're a great observer from the outside. So here's what I want you. I want to take that scientific mind you have. I had no idea what would come of this, but I knew that's who he was. I said, I want you, I mean, you're good at analysis, right? 2 PhDs, a scientist, I think he knows how to analyze. I said, I want you to take a look at our church. It's called Meadow Creek Community Church. I said, I want you to take a look at Meadow Creek now. And I'm going to give you a power. I'm going to tell people you're going to come around and ask questions, but you don't have any authority. You're just empowered to ask questions. Get whatever data you want, and then when you're ready, I want you to talk to me and tell me, what do you think is going on in our church these days? What do you think that we're doing the best? Why are we growing? And what do we need to do next? Basically, those were kind of 2 ideas I gave. So this scientist goes off. About 3 weeks, he's ready. Calls me up, and I'm a whiteboard guy. Poor Mary, he had to go surround with a whiteboard. And so I got a whiteboard in every office I ever had. And he said, I think I know what it is. And so I said, well, great. Well, tell me. He said, well, Russ, what's going on in your church is you have a bimodal distribution going on here. And I said, okay, James, so keep this in mind, right? I went to Bible college seminary. I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you break that down? And go, oh, yeah, sorry. So he gets on the whiteboard. Honest to God, exactly how it happened. Remember like yesterday. And he goes, you got a bimodal distribution on. So then he talks to me like a child. He goes, you know what a camel is? Yes, James, I know what a camel is. So it's like a camel. You got a 2-hump camel in the church. I said, yeah, that's a wide distribution. That's scientists talk for camel. Oh. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I went there, I interviewed all these people. And I started saying, what are you doing? And how did you get here? I didn't feel like everybody's excited about the church. How did you get here? Why are you doing it? I talked to people that were in ministry. And I was particularly interested in why so many people were engaged in ministry. And so I asked them, I said, well, why are you involved in ministry? And then I started asking other people who liked the church, but they weren't involved in ministry, why they weren't involved. I said, James, that's a good question. You got 2 PhDs to come up with that. So he said, yeah. He said, so the terms we came up with, right, we moved away from scientific terminology. Okay, so the terms we came up with were these guys, this group of people right here, they're self-initiators. And he had all the reasons why, right? They're self-initiators, this group right here. And these guys come into the church, and they're the people that walk up to you and go, hey, my wife and I have just been here for a few weeks. We love this church. How can we help? Right? You had one of those lately? If you have, you know who it was, right? It's like one. You go, oh God, send me one. So, but those are people, or they take their kids to the ministry area and they say, hey, if you ever need our help, we love kids, we'll help out, or they just hear some call for help or some volunteer sign, but they engage. They're looking, they're going to self-initiate. He said, but this is probably about, I think 10 to 20% of the people that have any kind of this self-initiator stuff. They either self-initiate on their own with no request, or when they hear opportunity, they gravitate toward it, or when they encounter something, they say, hey, by the way, if you need me, call me. But they self-initiate. The rest of the church is over here. I said, I know that. Right? The church is over here. And he said, now, these people are coming over here, but these people come over here, and as you talk to them, and I talked to these people, and I found out, because they didn't meet other criteria, that even though they're in here, they're actually one of these people over here. They're not really self-initiators, but they're over here on the service side. And I could tell from the data when I asked them the question, well, that's not a self-initiator, so how did you get from there to there? And the answers were, we went through the answers were, somebody took them by the hand and brought them in. Somebody said, hey, I'm going to a youth event. I'm going to go set up some games for an activity. You and I are buddies. You probably like kids too. Why don't you come with me? Or somebody said, hey, have you ever thought about helping out the kids here? That's where we serve. So somebody invited them and brought them in. So these guys are what we finally call on deck. Right? So these guys are on deck. They will help, but somebody's got to take them by the hand and bring them in. Right? So when you talk about, so this guy, so we work through this. So here's my point. So we're sitting in that very meeting where James is doing this. And I said, James, I said, I'll probably talk about it the rest of my ministry. And I have. I said, that's brilliant. I thought I've used that idea 1,000 times. I teach that idea to our staff. You got to have 1,000 recruiters, not one recruiter. You got all your people ought to be recruited. Remind them every once in a while. Right? You got friends. You guys probably have affinities, right? That's how our friends, we tend to attract people that have the same affinity. I like outdoor stuff. Well, come help with outdoor stuff in the church. Well, I like kids. Well, come help with the kids because that's where I'm going. So I've used that idea many, many times. So in that very same meeting, we got to the end of this, I just was high-fiving with James. And James, that is just awesome, man. That is just really true. And he said, hey, can I tell you something? He said, I'm a scientist. I said, yeah. And he said, I'm at that time maybe close to 40 years old. And he said, in my entire life, I've never been able to connect the dots between what I'm good at and the church. And you asking me to do this was the first time I could connect the dots between what I'm really good at and the church. And you know where I got that? In part, because my uncle, my great uncle, I'm named after, who kind of raised me, was a self-made multimillionaire, 8th grade education. Could move the world with a stick and a rock. Could help build a great company, Gifford Hill Gravel Company. When I buried him, Pete Gifford and John Hill were there, and I talked about my uncle, and they took me aside and over and they said, everything you said about your uncle was right. Your uncle could move the world with a rock and a stick. When we didn't have money in the day, through that economic downturn, we thought the company was going to go broke. And we didn't have any money for Russell to be able to fund anything. He was trying to build dams and roads and all stuff. He'd say, don't worry, we'll get it done. We'll figure out a way. The church never, ever understood how to tap into my life. And I used to, when I became a Christian as an adult, I started realizing that, and I started thinking about my uncle. I started thinking about this guy could change the world. So I started asking him, did you ever go to church? Did you ever try to connect? I started trying to lead him to Christ, obviously. And he started telling me stories where he tried to engage the church. But the church didn't understand him. He was singing in the choir or in the kitchen, whatever. They didn't understand his name. This guy can change the world. And he said, I just felt like, they just wanted me to sit and give. So our job, guys, I believe, is to prepare God's people for works of service, to use their gifts and their abilities to do whatever God's called them to do. And I think that is a game changer for most pastors. Because our models are mostly stand and preach. That's where all the heat is. It's like golf. My golf coach, which I only had a few lessons you can tell by my golf game, but my golf coach told me, he said, the problem with that driver is that's the sexiest club in the bag. Everybody wants to hit that thing. But if you can't hit a wedge, you can't hit a shot 30 yards, you don't get all wound up on this thing. And so it's kind of, we get caught up in the big stuff. Right? So, some observations. Paul challenges church leaders to live up to their calling. There are two groups of people that he's talking about, equippers and saints. I think when you're here today, you're being equipped. Right? So I'm the equipper and you're the saint right here. Right? But when you go back to your church, what role are you in? You're the equipper, right? So, and he says that there's nothing like the church when every part's doing its unique job. He says from him the whole body, this same passage, guys, joined and held together, every supporting ligament grows and builds itself up in love as each part prays together. As each part gets together and studies the Bible a little more. Nothing wrong with studying the Bible. I'm a DTS guy. You know how that is. Right? But as my friend Eric Geiger says, go to Simple Church. Ever at Simple Church? Eric Geiger likes to say, the problem is that Bible study's good, but churches don't know too much of a good thing. And we're like Coke addicts when it comes to the Bible. We don't want more Bible study. We want more Bible study. Not going to change anything. It's just going to give us more knowledge. We're not going to do anything in the community. We're not going to make anybody more effective. But we're going to study more. That's not what that says, guys. This passage, it promises this kind of church says what? When does the church become that kind of church? When every person in that church is what? Doing what God gifted and called them to do. I don't know how to tell you what a massive shift that is if you ever own that idea. All right, so the Jethro paradigm is the other one, the other anchor that we use. You guys are very familiar with this, probably preached on it many, many times. This is the passage of Moses, and you guys know it's across the Red Sea, which is pretty good success, right? And it's been a little while since he's done that, but not too long. And he's taken up his job, right? So the Bible says that as he got together, he basically set up his ministry to answer people's questions. He stood as judge. People lined up the Bible says as far as you could see him. Like that means as far as you could see him. And his father-in-law Jethro comes along, And his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, and he said, "Great job, Moses. Wow, looks like you're really busy. God's really blessing your ministry." That is not what Jethro says. Jethro says, "What are you thinking? What are you doing? What is this you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Now this is great. The Bible says, by the way, Moses is the most humble man of his generation. Look it up. Right? So notice what Moses' response. Moses, if it was me, I'd say, "I'm a little busy here, father-in-law Jethro. I'm a little busy. Would you back off? I don't know what you're talking about." "What do you mean, what am I doing? Look, this is what I'm doing." Moses is so humble, he doesn't react to Jethro. He basically thinks Jethro's saying, "What is your job description? What are you doing? What are you thinking?" I personally think Moses was a brilliant guy. And Moses gives him basically a job description. He's very calculated in what he said. Moses answers it and he says, "Well, because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me, and I decide between the parties, and I inform them of God's decrees and laws." Right? He doesn't blow him up. He gives him a very clear explanation of what he thinks his job is. And Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, says, "What you're doing is not good." Get this, guys. He says to Moses, "This is not a good way to lead." Now, let me tell you what we do. This is another passage that we probably all know, and we all spiritualize in a way. Where do most people use this passage in church work? Small group ministry. Break it all down. Break it down in 5s and 10s and 15s. That's most of the time I hear it. That's what I hear. Other than that, I don't hear it too much. I don't hear people really applying it too much. If I do hear it preached, they spiritualize it. It's a fantastic sermon. But it doesn't mean anything. And so, this is, I think Jethro meant what he said. And I'm a believer in that. I think the Bible generally says what it means. What are you doing? It's not good. You and these people who come to you. Now look, there's two problems in this passage. And this is a great test for you to know kind of how you do it. Okay? The word, he said, first of all, you and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. Problem number one, you cannot endure this, Moses. You're going to burn out. Problem number two, the work's too heavy for you, can't handle alone. That's still part of the same problem. Listen now to me, and I'll give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative. So here, look at Jethro. First thing he does, by the way, great leadership lesson here. When you're correcting people, the first thing you do is affirm them. First thing you do, unless you're firing, right? First thing you do is say, "I want to tell you, I see God's hand on you." He doesn't say to Moses, "You ought to get out of ministry, Moses." A lot of you guys came here probably sometime in the last week or 3 weeks or month have thought about quitting. Most pastors think about quitting a lot. Right? He didn't say you ought to quit. He didn't say, "You knucklehead, what are you doing? You ought to quit. You ought to get out of the way. You ought to let somebody else do it." No, he doesn't. He says, "You ought to learn how to lead better, Moses." And he says, "I'm going to give you some advice. God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God brings your disputes. Teach them the decrees and laws. Show them the way to live and duties that are informed. But, select capable men." This is a passage most people know. "From all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonesty." Some people apply this about elders or deacons or something. Trustworthy men, that's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about people who sit around and talk about things. He's talking about getting people who do things, right? Men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, appoint them officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges, actually making decisions, actually doing something for the people at all times. But have them bring the difficult cases to you. So you have a role to play, Moses. There's no threat here that you're not necessary. But the question is, what's your unique contribution to the team? There are certain things, every one of you in this room, there's certain things that you are the best person to do that in your church. But a whole bunch of stuff you're doing, you are not necessarily the best person to do it. It's just that you're the only one doing it. And that's because of how you're leading. Right? Have them serve as judges and so forth. That'll make your load lighter because they'll share it with you. If you do this as God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain and all these people will go home satisfied. Right? So those are the two positives, guys. If we lead right, there's two things that will happen. We'll be able to stand the strain, and what else will happen? How will people feel that you're leading? So here it is. Here's the two texts. Right out of the Bible. Well, I tell you, I'll beat you to death with the Bible and stuff. If you're feeling like you can't stand the strain, it's not that you're not called. It's that you're not leading right. Most pastors I talk to, including myself, when I talk to myself, most pastors I know who come face to face with, I think maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And then I ask them, and I've asked thousands of them, do you feel like you're not called? Do you think God didn't call you here? I can't tell you hardly one that's ever said. I can't tell you one guy that I can think of who ever said, no, I'm really not called to be here. Every pastor I ever talk to says, no, I know God called me here, but I just think maybe I'll get out of the way because I can't stand the strain. And the answer from Jethro was, you need to lead differently. You're not leading in a biblical way. That's why you can't stand the strain. And if you don't change this, you're going to be a statistic. And you will be too. And the other part is, the other test is, are people happy in the church? Are they really, truly happy? When they talk about the church, they go, our church may not be the biggest church on the planet, but I'll tell you what, we can get some things done. It's amazing what our church does. It's amazing when we put our mind to it. It's amazing how our leaders lead us. It's amazing how our pastor leads us. This is a great place to be. Is it perfect? No, but it's a great place to be. Guys, if that's not the tone of your church, it's a leadership problem. You think you got a people problem, and you've prayed the prayer, God, would you either move me somewhere else or kill all these people? And you guys know, or at least take and kill some of them. Well, you guys know that there was a time where God said, right, I'll wipe all these people out, Moses, and I'll help you. I'll let you start over with a new group. God never made you and me that offer because we would take it. Moses, you know what Moses said? Don't do that. You know why he said it? You know why? Why did he say it? Don't kill him. What was his motivation? God's reputation. Guys, there's nothing wrong with calling if you're called and you know you're called to be where you are. If you're feeling like you can't stand the strain, you got one of two choices. You either just keep feeling that way until it gets you, or you step up and go, I'm going to do this different. I'm going to die trying. If you're going to die doing it the wrong way, you might as well die trying to do it the right way. Right? So, and then the other part is eventually, guys, people will follow good leadership. Eventually people will see. Now, even with Moses, right, what did they say? Let's go back. Let's go back. So if you think this is a cakewalk, but Moses led his way out of his problems. And guys, I had that same moment. And I'm writing a book right now called Step Up. And I talk about the Moses moment. And I think there are many Moses moments in our lives. And those Moses moments are when we say, look, I'm not going to run from this. I'm going to lead my way out of it. I know God called me. So I must not be doing this right. And rather than me just sit around and have a pity party and wonder why I don't have better people, which is what I did, I'm going to become a better leader, and I'm going to lead. I'm going to quit blaming people, and I'm going to lead my way out of this. And God's going to help me. And that's a real Moses moment. And Moses had several of those. And I had those moments about every 5 years where I realized I'm at the next place. The ministry backdrop of that passage was success. Moses was doing well. He just had a big victory, but he still wasn't doing it right. That, by the way, that's a little trap. It's just because something is working well right now or having fun, you need to always take a look at it and make sure that you're not misinterpreting that to say, well, even though this looks successful, Moses had all these people around him. Some of us determine success just if there's a bunch of people around him. Moses clearly had a desire to serve, As an outsider, Jethro can see the obvious, and that's why all of us need a coach. All of us need somebody to look from the outside. And Moses was caught up in the urgent. You guys remember that little booklet, The Tyranny of the Urgent? Still true today. There's now it's funny. 20 years ago when I was reading that little book about the tyranny of the urgent, it was about when the cell phone rings in your office. Now it's all cell phones, right? But now there's all the data about. That we actually have a physical, like when somebody's phone was ringing a minute ago, whoever that was. We actually have a physiological reaction. They know this now. We have a chemical reaction in us when our phone rings. Somebody needs me. Somebody might be important. Might be good news. I don't know what it is, but all this stuff happens. That's why you can almost not answer your phone, right? It's horrible. It's like, I gotta look. I gotta at least a little text message. There's a physiological change there. It's the urgent stuff, guys, and the urgent is almost never important.
What do you do when it never rings? You thank God.
Then you're never your church.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Wait 6 months.
Yeah, Moses was calling. I'm not thinking about that. I'm not sure. But he criticized, but he didn't. He affirmed his calling, but he criticized his approach to leading. You guys, if you're not willing to be honest, and I don't mean critical and then just go on a pity party, oh, I'm such a bad leader. No, I mean just say, I can do better. I need to learn something new. I've been doing this way a long time. I know it's going to, when you remember when a kid learned to ride a bicycle, it felt really awkward, you fell down, skinned your knee, walked all around. That's the way it is to learn something new way to lead. It feels very awkward when you're doing it. But I'll tell you what's cool, is just like riding a bike, that moment that you go, wow, that actually is working in the church. This actually went better than the way I used to do this. People were actually happier with the result. Then you go like, I think I'll ride that bicycle a little longer. Then some of us did actually get addicted, and say, I like leading. I actually like it. I'm going to keep becoming better at it. He told Moses the goal of great leadership was endurance and effectiveness. And that's our goal. That's our hope. He wants you to do it. He wants you to get effective. Moses understood the importance of teachability. He listened to his father-in-law. He did everything he said. Now, I love my father-in-law, but I don't think I'd ever do anything that he said. But Moses was very, very teachable, and this has been a hallmark for us for years, guys. If you're not teachable, you shouldn't even waste your time, to be honest with you. I mean, who could not be teachable? So, to struggle with something's okay. To have pushback or say, this is hard for me is okay. That doesn't mean you're unteachable. But to say, look, you ever worked with anybody like that? Look, if you're going to work around here, this is how I am. Right? So if you're going to work around here, you better get used to it. This is how I am. Right? That's somebody who's saying, this is how I am, and I have nothing more to learn. Right? You don't want to be that guy. That certainly wasn't Moses. Look at some of this information here, guys. The pastor showed the greatest level of agreement. We did a survey. He said, I feel like I'm wearing too many hats. I feel like my church has a lot more potential. This thing really kills a lot of pastors. Because I just feel like my church, there's so much potential. I don't mean pie in the sky, have a dream, in a kind of goofy kind of way. I mean, really, I look at my church, I look at my community, there's so much potential. This is what is just excruciating for so many leaders, is to say there's so much potential here. I don't know how to get it out. I don't know how to help us do anything more than we're already doing. And it's not that I just want us to do more, I can see the potential of it. I see the potential in the people. I see my potential. Some of you guys really know, as I'm talking here, yes, I have more potential, but I don't know how to get it out. Oh, this guy has got an answer here eventually. I feel like my church has a lot more potential, but I don't know how to reach it. I feel, according to estimates, Allen Institute, very respected group, this is pretty current information. 17%. Now, I think it's a very conservative number. Charlotte Reserve says 1,400 ministers a year call toll-free hotline at SBC, and that's my background, and don't tell anybody, but that's not my Baptist background, which counsels ministers through Leader Care programs. Leader Care estimates that nearly 100 SBC pastors right now leave their ministry every month. And guys, they're not going to the church down the road. They're going out. They're leaving ministry. It's epidemic what's going on. And it's not new, by the way. This didn't just start happening last week. Sunscape says, serving clergy reported all denominations, 1,600 ministers a month are terminated. And I believe that, many times that's for leadership issues. Are some churches chronic and sick and ingrown and, you know, all the books that are written about dysfunctional church? Yes, right. But I'm going to tell you what, it's not all about that. It's that the pastor went into a situation and didn't have the leadership skills to know what to do. And he got his ears beat off. And he got destroyed by the thing because he didn't have a clue what he was doing. No matter how well motivated he was. Or is forced to resign. Only 1 out of 10 pastors go retire as a pastor. And at this point, everybody's saying, is it I, Lord? Is it me? I really want it to be me, Lord. This is a buddy of mine, a pastor in Australia. And he's an award-winning photographer as well. Very talented guy. Pastor, that's his day job in photography. And he won a countrywide award for this picture. And if you realize this picture is him and all these pictures right here. So he showed me this picture and he said, I want an award for this. And I said, oh, I got to have that picture. His name's Enzo. I said, Enzo, I got to have that picture. I said, that is such a perfect fit for what I do. He goes, well, do you realize what that is? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I get the idea. He said, no, the bottle of stuff right there, that's alcohol. That's whiskey. He came to show that to churches in America. I said, yeah, I can. I don't know what it is. It's tonic. It's whatever. It's hair remover. I don't know. So, but guys, this is how some of us run our churches. We're everywhere. We're the end all. So we want to get you out of that. We want to help you get out of that. Typical solution, this is what most pastors are going to say. Okay, the church has got more potential. It can do better. I got to work harder. I work harder and longer. So we're going to pass a sheet around for all you want to sign up. Work harder and longer. Some of you have been working harder and longer. How's it working out for you? Didn't it really just transform the church when you work harder and longer? Didn't happen. Right? It's sad and true. I'm going to pray more and be more spiritual. I'm going to preach better. And by the way, you need to do all these things. And you do need to preach better. Right? But that's always true. But some of you have preached your best sermons or series and thought that heaven was going to come down. And the truth is, it probably was some of your best teaching, and I mean that sincerely. And it didn't change a thing. And that is crushing sometimes. Right? Because that's not the problem. You did a great job on the preaching side, but that is not the problem. Having better programs, you should have good programs. You should do Dave Ramsey. You should do Awanas. You should do good programs if they're good programs, and if it's the right thing for you to do. We need more money. We just need to raise more money. I know churches get more money and they just squander it. Nothing changes. I know churches that are sitting on a ton of money and nothing changes. Because that's not the problem. It's not going to have a bunch of money. It's not going to solve anything. So you say, no, but I sure like to go ahead and have it anyway. Hire more staff. This is a killer. You know, where you pray, you go and meet with the boards, you get the money, you squirrel away money, you save it up, you get the church committed to hire that one new staff person, and you finally hire that staff person, and there's nothing wrong with that person. In fact, they're great, and they're good, they're the person that you hope they would, but it doesn't change that much. Spending more money. Costs more money, but more staff. But maybe you really do need that staff person. What I'm saying is, that one staff person, if everything's being led like it's always been led, is not going to change that much. It may help that one area some. And then you step back after 6 months or a year and go, I really thought this was going to be the fix. Right? So, Ministry of Advanced Solutions, we have 2 of them. Isn't that great? All these problems, we just got 2 things. One is change your perspective. Right? Why do we want to change your leadership perspective? We want to change the way you think. We want to change the way you think because there's a reality to the fact that what is that in here? Oh, it's the phone.
Yeah, it's probably a bill collector.
I get it. It's the church phone. Okay, so now we can all ignore it because it's not one of us. It's the church phone. So, guys, here's a as a practical matter, what we know about education and learning, once you learn something, you can't really unlearn it. Right? Once you get a learning or a thought or a concept in your head, you really can't kind of undo that. So what happens is when you get a concept in your head, especially if you affirm the concept, it changes. Whether you even realize it or not, it begins to change your actions. It may change your actions a little bit, it may change your actions a lot, but that change of thought changes your actions. What we want to do is we hope it changes it a lot of the time. Right? So if I change the way I think, it's going to change what I do. And if it changes what I do, it's going to change the outcome. Now I have some really pain pills that I've been giving you. I got another one I got to give you. Okay? Here's the other one. Your church is designed to give you right now exactly what you designed it to give you. Okay? If you've been leading that church any time at all, then what your church's outcomes are set up to do are exactly what you either set it up to do or what you're allowing it to do. So if you don't like the outcomes, then you have to change the way you think, which is going to change the what you do. Because outcomes are a lagging indicator, right? Outcomes, and we're going to talk about leading and lagging indicators later. But some of us are just focused on the outcome, and I want to change that outcome. And then what needs to change is the way we think. All right, so there's two. So here's the thing that we want to change in the way you think. First of all, it's what we call the doer trap. If you're a doer, you're working in your ministry more than you're working on it. Okay? You're working in it more than on it. And what I mean by that is you're using your own skills and your own knowledge. You're using everything you've learned in school, or if you didn't go the school route, and maybe you came through the marketplace and wound up in church leadership, some of us do. However you got there, all the gifts and tools and knowledge you have, you're using it all to do the ministry. Instead of using it all to work on the ministry and to help people who are working in the ministry, right? So you're working in your ministry, kind of caught up in it more than you're working on it. The developer is what we want you to be. And this is really what we want you to become. The ministry advantage, if we could say, there's a characteristic about ministry advantage pastors that we're proud of, is that they move from being a doer to being a developer. We think this is a very biblical concept. We think it's the concept of the Moses-Jethro paradigm, and we think it's the concept in Ephesians 4. Right? We want you to be a developer. So a developer works on their ministry more than in it. They learn a set of skills, whatever training you have. And I say, instead of me running around and doing all the ministry, I'm going to spend time with Micah, which I've been doing, by the way. I'm going to spend time with Micah, and I'm going to take my gifts and my abilities, and I'm going to help him. I'm going to help him do his ministry better. This is my focus. Take my gifts, my abilities, my learnings, everything I know, and help someone else to do what God's called them to do. Okay? Now, guys, that sounds simple. Now, here's another little test. You want to know how much you're doing that? If you really wanted to be honest about it, okay? If this was a financial class, if Dave Ramsey were here, he'd say, pull out your electronic checkbook or wherever you do it, and if we want to find out how you're spending money, let's just look at the checkbook. It'll tell us. Let's look at the bank statement. It'll sort it real quick for you. If you want to find out how you're spending your time when it comes to this kind of thinking about leadership, show me your calendar. Show me in your calendar where you've spent even an hour in the last month doing what I just described doing with Micah. Where you really sat down, trained somebody to do something, went with them into their ministry, let them shadow you, you shadow them. You're training them some skills like we're talking about here. You're working with them on how to delegate more effectively. You're actually teaching them concepts. You're actually walking with them. You're actually interacting with them as they're learning to lead. You're trusting them with more responsibility that's being talked about out loud. And this person, you're helping this person be more effective at what God's called him or her to do. If I look at your calendars, I'm telling you, some of you might be doing it, but I'll tell you, if you are, you're a rarefied air. Most of us came to the point of an hour in our calendar this last month that we spent any time truly training someone else to do something. We're just running around doing what we do. Right? So we want to change that. Now, the question usually comes, you want developers work on the ministry more than in it. How much more? Okay. My answer to that is just more. I don't care. I mean, so like, I don't know where you are, but probably if you're a doer and you got this scale tipped the wrong way right now, whatever it takes for you to first start moving that scale this way, whatever that takes, I'm happy with. Whatever, what's 1%, 2%, whatever. And then if you ever get it balanced even, if you even got to even, that'd be great. But if you ever can get, I know I can look at my calendar, my days, the way I live my life, I've actually tipped the scale and I'm working on ministry, developing people, developing what we're doing more, working on plans, working on implementation, spending time with people, becoming better at what they're supposed to be doing in the process, and doing my part too, but I'm spending more time working on my ministry now and I've tipped the scale. Okay? So that's exactly the process I went through. I was like this, and then as I started to even think about these ideas and concepts, and I could start to identify time and space and ways and things I was doing with my staff and leaders and lay people, and I started saying, I have to spend more and more of my time. This is ministry as well as evangelism, preaching, these other things. I have to work this into my life. So eventually I can honestly say, I am providing leadership for my church. I'm working more on the ministry, not just doing it all myself. And I've got a growing evidence of that. And then one day it tips. And that's a really fun day when you can honestly say that. Guys, I spend now probably 90% of my time developing. Of course, I'm out here doing this. This is separate from church work. This is a not-for-profit organization that we built. But even at church, I have over the years, and as the church has grown, and I've developed more and more people. And by the way, I don't ever like to hear that argument. Well, you got a bunch of staff. Listen, guys, there's no difference. It's all relative. When I had 5 staff people, or you have 50 staff people, we have 240 staff people now. It's no different. It's just more headaches, right? It's just more people. Now, I'm telling you, that's honest truth. So don't wish for the guy's church down the street. God's not going to ask you, did you do what I did in terms of church? He's going to ask you, did you do everything you could do where I called you to serve? That's what he asks a missionary, right? That's what he's going to ask you. Were you faithful where I called you? And I don't mean did you just hang in there to the bitter end? That's not faithful. Faithful is the story of one guy buried it in the ground. That's not faithful. Master wasn't happy with that. So it's not about the size of your church. It's about your church being more effective at reaching its community for Christ, which means you have to do this right, to empower your people, to train folks, for you to lead right so that you have a life that's worth living, so you have some sanity. And but over time, you have to do this over time. And there was a time when I committed to go down this path, guys, I was completely opposite of this. I mean, I was at ground zero and I knew it. I was using all my personal energy to push that ball up the hill as hard and fast as I could push it. And I got to a place where I knew if I stop, it's all going backwards. I can't keep doing this. This is not working. I got the Moses problem. It's not going to work. Okay? So it's a matter of over time tipping that scale, not overnight. You didn't get where you are overnight. You didn't get these habits that you have overnight, and you're not going to change them overnight, but you can change them over time. And they'll have an effect. They will have an effect. And then our second solution is to develop a systems approach to everything. Well, why in the world would we do that? We have 7 practices with effective churches. These are the modules that you guys are probably all familiar with. Let me talk to you about systems for a minute. The reason that I talk about this is because it's central to Ministry Advantage. Ministry Advantage, guys, we have a systems bias. You guys need to pass candy around. They want that. Look at it. They're sparking up. Yeah, I had those. We have a systems bias, right? So everything we do with everything we teach, we have a system behind it, right? Everything we do have a system behind it. And for that reason, I want to tell you, Ministry Advantage, we have a systems bias. In my church, we have a systems bias. We believe things work better when there's a system behind it, right? Your car works better when the system of your car works well. Right? Everything in the universe works better. God created a world that's pretty system-oriented. There's a human body system, there's a cell system, there's an ecosystem, there's the universe, the solar system. You can name 1,000 of them probably, right? Have you noticed that? We talk about systems. Guess what? Maybe God's kind of systems oriented. Does that mean God can't be spontaneous or what appears to us to be spontaneous? Sure He can. God can do whatever He wants. But it doesn't change the fact that overwhelmingly the nature of God appears to be that He is very systems oriented about what He does. Did any of you went to a Bible college or seminary study systematic theology? Isn't it amazing that we're even able to look at theology and go, what a fascinating system this is. I mean, it actually makes sense, you know. God did that. So because of that, I want to talk to you about the central issue of systems. Because in one of our workshops, I entitled this thing, that systems is not a four-letter word. And a lot of us feel like, systems, when we talk about it, sounds cold and terrible. And systems are our friends, guys, and I want to make that case to you. First of all, systems improve consistency. All right? So anything, let me tell you how you know that you got a systems problem in your church. Anything that works 1 week and doesn't work right the next week, and then it works for 3 weeks, and then it goes bad the next week. They got the microphones are on 1 week, the lights go out the next week, this goes happening, that goes happening. The youth ministry does this one time, the next time it goes bad. Right? You got all these anomalies, all these things. Well, you just like you're holding your breath week to week because you don't know what's going to work, what's not. You know what that is? That's a systems problem, friend. You have no consistency. When you don't have systems, you have no consistency. You can wish, you can pray, you can hope, you can preach, you can holler, you can shout, you can cry. You can do anything you want, but if you don't fix it from a system standpoint, it will never get fixed. So you need to understand systems. We're going to teach you some about systems. And if I were you, I would learn more about systems. There's lots of things you can study and read about systems. Keep it simple. I'm a simple guy. You're going to find out I'm a one-page kind of guy. I like one-page job descriptions. I want the strategic plan after months of working on it to come down to one sheet of paper. Okay, so I'm a simple guy, and that says if it's not simple, you're not going to do it. Okay, and I believe that about systems, so don't think for a minute that I'm talking about rocket science. I am not a rocket scientist. If you get too much detail in front of me, my eyes roll back in my head and I pass out. So I have to understand simple things. It encourages innovation and improvement. The first thing people are going to say is when you start talking about systems is, don't box me in. You got people in your church, and you got people on your staff, and you got volunteer leaders. And if you start talking about systems, and I don't think you probably even should use that word, by the way. Process is a much friendlier word in church work. I don't know why, but it is. So I wouldn't even use the word system. But some people, when you start, if they get the idea it's a system, don't box me or boxing me in. You want to write this stuff down now? You want to know what we're doing and when we're doing it and how we're doing it? I feel so limited. I can't innovate. Hogwash. That's hogwash. That is a smoke screen. That's all that is. That's just somebody who doesn't want to learn something new, and it could even be a little bit of laziness. So it encourages it. Systems encourage innovation. How is that? Because a system is designed to create an outcome. Right? When I do systems, and we write out systems, I draw little squares on board, just very simple systems. Here's 5, 6, 7 steps, and here's the outcome. We're going to do this, 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 and this. We're going to do this and that, and that, and this, and that, and this, and then here's the outcome. Here's the outcome we want to come out of this ministry, or this particular piece of the deal, right? Whatever it is, here's the outcome. Well, if it's a simulation, and we're looking at our simulation process, or it's a membership class, and we're looking at the membership process, or it's whatever it is, the financial system, and we're looking at the financial, how the finances are done. Whatever it is, if it's scheduling, and every week it's different, and it's a mess. Whatever the system is, it's designed to give you an outcome. And so when you look at what's going on, you go, we're not getting the outcome that the system's designed to give. One of two things happens. It's time to innovate. Go back, put the system on the board, and say, are we doing it the way we created it? About half the time, you're going to find out that we're not really doing it the way we created it. And that's what the problem is. There's nothing wrong with the system. We're not doing it. We've gotten away from it. Right? We got the basics down. We knew what made this work, and we did it for a while. Now we've gotten away from it, and all that does is reinforce how important that system is. Or it could be that the church has grown, developed, changed. This system is no longer completely adequate, and we need to modify it. But guys, if you don't have a system to look at to know what your outcome is, to be able to tell if you're getting what you think you're supposed to be getting, and you don't have a way to look at that in terms of even a simple system that you can write down on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, how do you possibly know what needs to change, what's working, what's not working? How do you talk through it? How do you modify? How do you innovate? It's all in your head. It's all in the cloud. Right? And nobody understands, really. You walk away from meetings and people copy different pieces of it, and you'll still have no consistency. So don't think for a minute systems stifle innovation. Systems give you an opportunity to innovate effectively and efficiently. Okay? Systems establish training for every ministry area. How's that? Well, when you have a system, then you say, it's interesting. Barney did this study, he said, he and Dobson did a study together years and years, 15 years ago, pastors, trying to help pastors. And they asked pastors, they said, how do you feel about, what do you feel the worst about in terms of your leadership in the church? And pastor said, I feel the worst about training my staff and my leaders. I don't know how to do a good job. So 85% of pastors said the thing they felt the worst about in terms of their leadership was that they weren't training their leaders well. So that came out in the book. Well, Barnett picked that up. He thought that was very interesting. So he picked it up. They knew who that data bunch was. So they resurveyed that data bunch, Barnett did. And he said, you indicated on a previous survey that you felt that your worst part of leading was that you didn't train your leaders well. And Barnett's question was to that group, what is it that you feel you're not training them to do? And 85% of the group that he resurveyed said, I don't have any idea. I don't have any idea I don't know. I guess that's why I don't know what I'm supposed to train them to do. I mean, I preach and I teach and I talk about character and loving God and being moral and stuff like that. I ran out of stuff after a while. I don't know. I called a pastor up. I called a teaching pastor up on our staff. He's not on our staff anymore. He's a good guy, great guy. And I called him up and I said, hey, I got this businessmen's lunch that we're hosting at the church every week. Guys from the community come. And it's a 1 hour lunch. We give you a great meal. We give you 45 minutes of a good thought.